The urinary system's main responsibility is to eliminate different types of nitrogenous waste in your body. And those nitrogenous wastes you're going to see about in just a minute are really derivatives of different types of catabolic processes. In other words, when we break down certain types of molecules, we end up producing nitrogenous wastes. And if those nitrogenous wastes were left in the blood, it would eventually create a toxic environment for cells. So the urinary system's job is to get rid of those nitrogenous wastes, and it does so by forming urine. And that's the main thing the urinary system does that everybody seems to know about, but it turns out that there's a lot of other important things that the urinary system does. The one that we're going to focus on a little bit when we talk about pH balance is how it helps to maintain homeostasis in the body. The kidneys are very tightly linked with controlling things like blood pH. They're also tightly linked with helping to maintain homeostasis of, for example, blood pressure. We know we can influence the kidneys in terms of how much water they retain by the levels of ADH and aldosterone that we secrete. And that, as a result, causes more fluid to stay in the blood, and therefore blood volume stays high and blood pressure stays high. Of course, the urinary system is also closely linked to the reproductive system, particularly in males, because the urethra, the opening through which urine exits the body, is a shared tube in males. It's both the point of exit for urine as well as for ejaculate, for the release of sperm. Okay. There are different parts of the urinary system. Just to briefly remind you, the kidneys are the probably most obvious part. We also have the ureters, which are the tubes that connect the kidneys to the bladder. Maybe I should do this in a different color and you can see it better. Yeah, that color isn't any better. Let me try one more. How about this one? Here we go. There's the ureters. Here's the bladder down here. This is where we store formed fluid until such time as it's okay and socially appropriate to release that urine. Remember that the kind of cells that line the bladder are the special type of epithelial cells that are called transitional epithelial cells. Remember, they have the ability to stretch as the bladder fills and then to kind of recoil back to their original cuboidal shape when the bladder is empty. And then, of course, there is the final exit out of the body, the tube that connects the bladder to the external environment, and that is called the urethra. So as I said before, the main job of the kidneys, although not their only job, is to filter the blood plasma and to reduce the amount of nitrogenous waste present in the blood. And we're going to look much more in detail with this in another unit of this series of lectures. Another thing the kidneys do, as I said, they help to contribute to the control of blood volume, and therefore indirectly they also are helping to manage blood pressure. So for example, here you can see if we had a problem state where we had a drop in blood pressure, this would signal the kidneys to release renin. And renin is very good at taking and converting a precursor molecule from the liver called angiotensinogen. You know it's a precursor molecule because it ends in OGEN. All zymogens end in OGEN, and zymogens are simply precursor enzymes. They're enzymes that have not yet been activated. When they become activated, we take the OGEN off the end. So renin is used to convert angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1. Now, this angiotensinogen originally came from the liver. It's present in the blood. So when renin encounters angiotensinogen, it converts it into angiotensin 1. Blood then circulates around through the lungs on its through the pulmonary circuit. And in the lungs, there is an enzyme called angiotensin converting enzyme, or ACE for short. And that converts angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2, and this is its final active form. Angiotensin 2 has a number of impacts. One, it helps to, as the name implies, produce tension in the blood vessels, tensin for tension, angio relates to blood vessels, so this helps with vasoconstriction, in other words. It also, angiotensin 2, also helps to stimulate the hypothalamus to make you feel thirsty, so that you take in more fluid to help elevate blood volume. And the renin that we use to make angiotensin 2, to help make angiotensin 2, also reflects back to the adrenal cortex here above the kidney and stimulates it to release aldosterone, which we know also helps to retain fluid. So the cumulative effect of vasoconstriction, the intake of more water, and the reduction of water loss in the urine all helps to elevate blood pressure, and this, of course, alleviates our original problem state where blood pressure had dropped. So that's the third thing kidneys do. They secrete that renin. Now you know the pathway of how renin interacts with angiotensinogen. Other things that the kidneys do, they secrete a very important hormone called erythropoietin, or EPO. You'll remember erythropoietin is necessary for the stimulation of red blood cell production, and that if a person goes into renal failure, they oftentimes will stop producing erythropoietin. So now not only will they have renal failure, they'll also become anemic and have a very difficult time getting sufficient amounts of oxygen to deliver to tissues. The kidneys also help to regulate, and you're going to think this sounds really weird, but you'll understand later, they help to regulate the levels of carbon dioxide that are present in the blood. And as we're going to learn in a later lecture, there's a very tight link between levels of carbon dioxide in the blood and the pH of the blood. The more carbon dioxide I have present in the blood, the more acidic the blood is. And again, we'll look into that in a lot more detail later. And then another thing that it does that many people don't know is that the kidneys also have the ability to undergo gluconeogenesis, which you remember means to manufacture new molecules of sugar, of glucose, from precursor molecules such as amino acids. And normally this is done during times of starvation. That's when both the liver and kidney will kick in with gluconeogenesis. So I told you that the primary, the most important job perhaps of the kidneys is that they're there to filter out metabolic waste products from the blood and to eliminate them, to excrete them, I should say. Excrete is the proper word. To excrete them from the body in the forming urine. Now, we don't want to use the word eliminate. Okay, eliminate has a different meaning. Elimination, as we'll learn when we get to the digestive system, means that you just pass something through the body and you never used it, you never processed it, you never filtered it or anything like that. Okay, so when we eliminate feces, what we're eliminating basically is we're allowing to pass through our body the unusable portions of the food that we never interacted with. By comparison, excretion, like what your kidneys do or your sweat glands do, is a process of filtration. You are filtering a fluid and taking out those items that you no longer want to be present and getting rid of them out of the body. That's excretion. Okay, so what are some of the kinds of metabolic waste products that we excrete from the kidneys? The most common is urea. Urea is formed when I take two ammonia molecules and I join them together with a carbon between them. So it would look something like this. And then we'd have another nitrogen over here. Here's the urea right here. Okay, so here's my urea molecule. It's just two ammonia molecules joined together. The ammonia originally came from the breakdown of amino acids. So during normal metabolic activity, some amino acids are broken down, and in the process we have ammonia produced. Then the liver, this happens in the liver, takes two molecules of ammonia and joins them together to create a less toxic substance called urea. And urea is then filtered out of the blood by the kidneys and shuttled into the forming urine. That's urea. Uric acids are another type of nitrogenous waste product produced during the breakdown, this time, of nucleic acids. So here's a molecule of uric acid. It's a breakdown product of RNA, of DNA, etc. And it also is filtered out of the blood and shuttled into the forming urine. Last one is creatinine, this guy over here. Now, creatinine is the breakdown or the catabolic product of breaking down creatine phosphate. And you'll remember creatine phosphate is that molecule that's found commonly inside of muscle tissue, and its job is to serve as a quick resource for phosphate molecules that we can use to make quick ATP before oxygen levels have caught up with muscle demand. Notice that this is creatine phosphate. When we take the phosphate group off, it becomes creatine. And if we, as normally happens, eventually add a phosphate group back on again, then it becomes creatine phosphate again. Now, if at some point that creatine molecule has just become beyond the point of having phosphate groups added and taken off, taken off, then it breaks down further into creatinine. Notice that there's an extra I and an extra N in there. So creatinine is a nitrogenous waste product. Creatine and creatine phosphate are normal functioning molecules that are found in places like skeletal muscle tissue. What happens if the kidneys aren't able to remove the waste from the blood as they should? The first thing that's going to happen is you're going to begin to get a buildup of those nitrogenous waste products. You're going to get higher than normal levels of urea and uric acid and creatinine present in the blood. This is a condition called azotemia. So azotemia simply means the presence of abnormally high levels of nitrogenous waste in the blood. If that situation is not corrected and those nitrogenous wastes are allowed to continue to accumulate and get higher and higher and higher in terms of levels inside the urine, we can progress to a potentially fatal condition called uremia. And uremia is, again, as I said, extremely high levels of waste products present in the blood that cause symptoms. Okay, azotemia, you just have a buildup of nitrogenous waste in the blood, but you're pretty much asymptomatic. When you start to develop symptoms like the ones I've listed down here, things like having a hard time breathing, which is called dyspnea or shortness of breath, having cardiac arrhythmias, vomiting, those are signs that you are your levels of nitrogenous waste products have become toxic. If that is not corrected, the person can experience convulsions, slip into a coma, and they can die. So remember before, a couple slides ago, I said that there was a distinct difference that I needed to address with you between what the kidneys do, which is excretion, and what the digestive tract does, which is elimination, okay, the elimination of feces versus the excretion of urine. So again, just to remind you, with excretion, we're separating out via a process of filtration, we're separating out from the body fluids any waste molecules that we want to get rid of. And it happens in an area of microscopic area of the kidneys that's shown down here called the glomerulus, is where this the first part of this filtration process occurs. Again, compare that with elimination. In elimination, the feces that is eliminated from the body has not been filtered through anything. Okay, it just was never used. So we're just passing through what we didn't use as opposed to filtering out things. Now, lots of different organs in the body, as I said before, can undergo excretion. We said that there were that your skin has cells in it with the ability to undergo excretion, and that can happen through, for example, sweat glands, where we can excrete water and salts and lactic acid and even a little urea. You'd be interested to know that patients that are in renal failure, oftentimes they will get a strange smell to their skin, and that's because their skin is attempting to excrete urea and other waste products that the kidneys are not eliminating or excreting as they should be. The lungs are also a pair of organs that have the ability to excrete substances. They excrete carbon dioxide and they absorb oxygen, of course. The other thing they excrete is water. The digestive tract can both do elimination and excretion. The digestive tract, as I said before, eliminates unused food in the form of feces, but it also has the ability to excrete via filtration process some compounds such as water. If you've ever heard of bile, it has the ability to excrete bile, some cholesterol molecules, and also some salts. And then, of course, the kidneys are the major players when it comes to excretion, and they have the ability of getting rid of lots of different types of molecules from the body, including the nitrogenous waste products like urea, uric acid, and creatinine I talked about before. They can excrete toxins and drugs. For example, penicillin. The reason why you have to take penicillin as frequently as you do, in part, is because much of it gets excreted from the kidneys before it even has an opportunity to interact with bacteria. Hormones get excreted in the kidneys. In fact, common pregnancy tests, for example, are looking to detect the higher than normal levels of certain types of hormones in the urine, such as human chorionic gonadotropin. Salts get eliminated in the kidneys. Of course, water is a big thing that gets eliminated in the kidneys, and hydrogen ions get eliminated, excreted in the kidneys. See, it's easy to say eliminated when you mean excreted, and I've taught this for years, and I still mistakenly say eliminated when I mean excreted.